I would like to share a personal story about a near-death experience that I had when I was only 14 years old. I have now reached the age of 38 and I have kept this story to myself for too long of a time. I have never shared it online before. However, I feel that it is important to share my experience with others in the hopes of being taken seriously. Unfortunately, the only two people that I have shared my story with didn't believe me. They thought that I was imagining things, but I know that what I experienced was real. Their response to my story was that they understand that I believe it happened, but they don't. So, I am reaching out to those who will listen and hope that you will hear my story with an open mind. So, at the age of 14, I made a decision that would undoubtedly alter my day-to-day life in a way I never could have foreseen. One day, I decided to ditch school with a few friends. Although I was in 8th grade, one of my friends was in high school and had already earned his driver's license, which made the idea of skipping school all the more enticing. After some deliberation, we decided to spend the day at our friend's house, situated a few miles away. My friend's car had those older-style bench seats with no console in the front. I was positioned in the middle of the front seat. There were 3 people sitting in the back seat and 3 in the front of the car. As we got into the car, I remember feeling excited about the drive ahead. However, that excitement was short-lived as we were involved in a serious car accident. During the crash, the impact was so severe that the weight of all 3 backseat riders was forced forward, slamming into the front seat where I was sitting. The force of the impact was so intense that I was knocked unconscious, and the next thing I remember is waking up to the sound of the EMT's voice. The force of the impact was so immense that it caused the center of the bench to buckle and collapse, trapping me against the dashboard. As I was seated in the middle of the bench, I bore the brunt of the collision and suffered serious injuries that rendered me unconscious. To make matters worse, we were on a desolate road between 2 towns, and it took an agonizingly long time for the ambulance to arrive and provide much-needed medical attention. As I was driven in the ambulance, my mind raced with fear and uncertainty. The pain in my body was excruciating, and I feared the worst. When we arrived at the hospital, my parents were already waiting for me, their faces etched with worry. The medical staff quickly wheeled me into a room, and I was bombarded with a flurry of activity. They conducted a battery of tests to assess the extent of my injuries, and I lay there, feeling helpless and vulnerable. It wasn't until that moment that I realized how fragile life truly is, and how quickly it can be taken away from us. It was actually, in one point, confirmed that I was going to die. The hospital staff told my family to say their goodbyes since I had internal bleeding behind my kidneys. They were wrong and later proved to be a terrible hospital. However, I did have a broken rib, and still to this day I have a dent in my leg and skull from this wreck. Let me paint a picture of the moment that changed everything. I was lying in my hospital bed, feeling weak and exhausted. I closed my eyes for just a brief moment, and when I opened them again, I was no longer in my body. I looked down and saw myself lying on the bed, completely still. As I floated above myself, I was struck by the strange sensation of weightlessness. Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion, and I felt completely detached from my physical form. I didn't feel anything, no pain or fear, no panic. It was like I was an objective observer of the situation. Like it wasn't my body lying there completely still. Like it was completely normal for me to be floating in the ceiling and looking down on this hospital room. It was a surreal and otherworldly experience, one that I will never forget. I could see the doctor standing on the left side of my body, intently studying some papers on a clipboard. Suddenly, his concentration was broken as he looked up and gazed across my body towards the machine attached to me. Without wasting a moment, the doctor sprang into action and rushed to my left wrist to check my pulse. He then darted to the machine on my right and fiddled with it for a few moments. As he did so, a strange sensation washed over me, and before I knew it, I was opening my eyes and finding myself back in my own body. Now, I want to elaborate on a few things. While on the ceiling, there was something coming from my left. Out of the corner of my eye, it looked like rolling clouds and light. My biggest regret to this day is not turning around to look at it. Also, you would think that if you closed your eyes and when you opened them, You were all of a sudden above your body on the ceiling that you would freak out, scream for help or attempt to air swim back down to your body. However, when this happened, I felt nothing. I didn't care at all that I was on a ceiling. It was like feelings and fear were non-existent. I'm afraid of heights, and being on the ceiling did not bother me at all. And make no mistake, I was me. I knew who I was. I knew that I was looking at my own body. But it was like my body was just a vessel that I had used to walk around in. It was crazy, and I didn't care at all that I was on that ceiling. It was like I had been there 100 times before. I want to point out something else I noticed. I watched as the doctor suddenly looked up to the machine, then ran over and checked my pulse. Even though I knew the machine was what got his attention, I heard nothing while on the ceiling. I couldn't hear the machine or anything. The first thing I remember thinking when I opened my eyes back in my body was that I had to tell someone what happened to me. My stepmom entered the room when the doctor left, and I told her. I could see all over her face that she thought I was crazy. Years later, I watched a documentary about near-death experiences, and there was a woman whose experience matched mine in every detail. I was shocked. This experience changed my whole belief system. It changed my entire view of life, death, and religion. It took away the primal fear we all have of dying. It changed my views on religion. I want people not to worry about dying. You're going to be okay. It's not the end. I'm sure there is something else in store for all of us after death. And I think it's beautiful.